There is plenty of seats right at the front in that special front row spot there.
Good evening. Thank you for coming out. We were going to have this event last night. Don't know what sort of response we would have got. Would have been nil. We had TV. It would have worked okay, but I thought that Daryl would pull a bigger crowd than the state of origin, but I think it was 55,000 last night, Daryl.
Yeah, that was a great. I don't think it's going to be that much in Sydney though.
It might be, this might be a bigger crowd than Sydney. Yeah, very good. Hey everybody, thanks for coming. Welcome to Jeff Jones. For those of you who haven't been here before, for those of you who have, it's a new look here as of Monday. So we've got a nice fit out here that we've just finished up on Monday. So this is the recommencements of some seminars that we've done over the years, and we see a lot of familiar faces back again. So thank you everyone for coming back again. Part of our fit out here, the idea was for us to relaunch these seminars and have a space where we could gather people together and get experts like Daryl in to share their knowledge. So yeah, this is our first one. This is going to be a monthly session that we're doing. So basically the format is to have, well tonight is Daryl Richards, and Daryl's going to run through obviously what's happening in the local neighbourhood in terms of some big changes with town planning. And an opportunity for people to ask questions of these experts. So we've got a panel of people that we rely on. Daryl from a town planning. He looks very trustworthy. He is also a lawyer.
Yeah. Please don't hold that against me.
So he's doubly trustworthy. Is that right? Town planning from an accounting point of view, similar things we've done in the past. So yeah, we really thank you for coming along again. We're going to be asking for feedback, and we'll get some emails and things out after the event tonight. We'd love some input as to what people would love to hear from these events. They're very much about a learning environment for property owners, and yeah, good on everyone for attending tonight, because I think there's some great information in terms of what Daryl's knowledge of town planning. It's certainly something that we rely pretty heavily on at the office. He gets quite a few calls, so yeah, the format tonight, I think Daryl's going to run through for something for about half an hour in terms of what's happening in the neighbourhood, and from there it's open up the floor to a Q&A session. So we'll test him. So ladies and gentlemen, Daryl Richards.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm very privileged, and I'm a bit of a property nerd. I've been investing and developing since the mid-90s. I actually remember when this house got moved over from the back of the block, and there was an old shop here when Jeff did it at the turn of the century. I am a town planner. I own a town planning firm, and I also own the law practice. So it's very good for me, for someone who likes property all the time, because I get to see, I don't work in the planning practice anymore, it's managed, but I still consult on every day, and I'm in the current environment with the Brisbane City Council, it being quite aggressive. I spend a lot of time in the Planning and Environment Court appealing knockbacks, prosecutions for planning, but it's great. I get to see when things are happening and what's coming up. So I was quite involved in the Brisbane City Plan 2014, which was originally City Plan 2012, which is very typical of how government works. It takes a long time to come through. And I get to see where the market's heading as well, because I can see what's coming in, and when the Sydney investors are looking at blocks and seeing what needs to be developed, and when townhouses, and when are 4 and 6 packs of units in townhouses going crazy at the moment, or is it 1 to 2 subdivisions? And you can sort of see those coming along through the planning practice, and then through the law firm when it actually turns into purchases and developments and on sales. So tonight, I just thought we'd look at the local area, give a quick overview of what happens in City Plan 2014. Now, the Eastern Corridor Plan is where we are. So the Eastern Corridor Plan is a neighbourhood plan that goes over. We'll go through that in a moment. That was in the old plan and hasn't changed a great deal in this one. This is going to be valid until this year, although it's City Plan 2014. the state government has kindly just passed the Planning Act, which next year comes in and will change everything again. It'll probably more change for me than for you, as in it'll change how we write applications and how they're assessed at this stage rather than what you can actually do with the site, because they've just spent obviously a long time. The previous one before City Plan 2014 was City Plan 2000. So it's been a long time between updates. Okay, Brisbane City Council has an awesome free site. This pdonline.brisbane.qld.gov.au. You can go on there, type in a property address, have a look at the 1946 aerial photograph, have a look at the 2012 aerial photograph. 1946, reason that that's valid is because if it's in a character error and it was there in the 46 photo, chances are you can't knock it down. That's why we have the 46 there. It'll show flooding, overland flows, planning, contours, you can measure distances on there, all completely free. It is a great resource. Brisbane has one of the best for that, so we're very lucky. It really does also link to current applications. So you can put an application inquiry into your street and see every application since 2006 and see what's happened. You can also run a search on your property address and it'll give you a printout of every overlay, every issue there within reason. You can also actually look at the links to the Floodwise report on there and generate a Floodwise report to see where you're at. And it has the whole city plan link too, which is called E-Plan. So you can actually go and look at the individual codes. Planning's got a hierarchy in the Queensland system. So best example I can say of that is 2 years ago, a client of mine bid at an auction in Nunda for a site that was zoned low density residential. Unfortunately for the vendor, the agent and the vendor had no idea that the overlay allowed 12 stories on it. So it was a character residential site which said, so as far as they knew when they went to auction, it was a pre-46 house that you couldn't demolish. It was actually a 12-story site that you could demolish. Only my guy happened to be the one who knew it, because on RP data and all the other search providers, it doesn't show you the neighbourhood plan. So when people go and search a property, it says the zoning, which in this case was low density and character, pre-46. And so everyone, bar one person at that auction, who that everyone thought paid a little bit too much, but it was actually a 12-story site on a 1,200 square metre block. So the neighbourhood plans make a huge difference. They override everything else. And then right where we are here is the Eastern Corridor Plan. Then we have a zoning, which is your old Res A, Res B. Now it's low density residential, low medium residential, 1, 2, 3, mixed use, district corridors. There's a whole lots of different zonings. You can't rezone land anymore. People still talk about rezoning land. There's places around where there's shopping complex. Perfect example would be Norman Park Post Office, and the little shops there, still zoned low density residential. The use changes, so all we can do is apply for a use. So sometimes things don't make sense. You look at a block and it says that's low density residential. How did that happen? Someone's changed the use. Then there's constraints called an overlay. So one of them that people freak out about in Brisbane that comes on is the airport environs overlay. That means you can't be any more than 240 something metres tall because it interferes with the radar. But every single property in Brisbane has that as an overlay. It'll also have flood overlays, character overlays. So traditional building character means that you can't demolish. There's a whole range of overlays in there that may also affect what you can and can't do. An overlay won't up what you can do. it'll more likely bring down what you can do. It might have an overland flow path overlay, which means that it's not a flood event, it is a rainstorm running water event. So you might notice if you've been up opposite McDonald's in the back of Coorparoo, bad overland flow paths through there. Council has resumed a heap of land through there. There's a park that is starting to take shape through there. That's all going to be dug out and have a huge rock pool, waterway, creek right running through there to deal with the overland flow path. You couldn't build anything in a lot of those zones for a long time. Flood we can deal with, often we can build above it. Overland flow path means that it runs really fast, and if you're going to do anything, chances are it's going to pool up. So if you put a slab down, if you build something else there, it's going to pool up, and so it's not a flood that slowly rises up and what you do there doesn't really make a difference. It means there's fast flowing water in a rain event and it stops. So there's lots that you can see in an overlay. So as I said, we're sitting right now in the Eastern Corridor Neighbourhood Plan. Now one thing, if you go and notice this, is that you can see the era of it. One of the centres we'll look at, it talks about up where the old Myer Centre site is, that there should be a market in there. That was because there was a food and stall market in the old Myer building at the time it was written. It takes a long time to go. They tried to do a big push for a Melbourne style markets in the old Myer Centre for about 2 years. It was the time that they were writing this plan. So it actually talks about that. That's obviously gone now. We've got the new development in there with the cinemas, etc. So in plans, we have a precinct. So I thought I'd have a look at this precinct first, Buranda Precinct. Up here where the old Noble was, where the largest student development in Brisbane is now going in, with 4,000 apartments in one complex. So the neighbourhood plan breaks down into different precincts. So if you're in these precincts, in here, so if you own a block in here, if you've got 800 square metres, that neighbourhood plan says you've got 12 stories. If you've got 2,500 metres, it's 25 stories. And there's thresholds in there. But if you're there and outside the neighbourhood plan, you'll have the same zoning as this and you won't be able to build. So back in around 2004, 2005, there was heaps of stuff in the mall. They wrote to everyone saying, city shape, what do we want in city shape? And apparently us as a public said we want ribbon development. So they offered us, do we want the city just to get huge? Do we want to have satellite cities? Do we want to have ribbons, or do we want to have a combination of ribbon and satellite cities? We went for the combination. So the Brisbane public who voted on that or gave feedback on that went for the ribbon and satellite. So Chermside, Mount Gravatt, Carindale, those sort of areas going to have towers. And then we've got the ribbons. Along the ribbons mean that we will have very high towers, but it's only for the ribbon. So if you're here, you might still only be able to do 2 stories even though you've got 25 stories across the road. It's very restrictive. Here we are here in the Stones Corner development at the moment. And you can see that we've got 800 metres squared for 6 stories and 2,500 metres for 12 stories. So it changes. There's also some higher level stuff we'll look in a minute that changes between the precincts as what you can and can't do. So again, they're trying to do the ribbon from through the Gabba along here. At the moment, this goes as far as Bennetts Road. It's going to go to Carindale when they do the next bit. Coorparoo Precinct. So you can see we've got a lot of greenery starting to come in here. These are the new parks for overland flow paths. 800 metres there is 12 stories. 2,500 is 15 stories. Anyone know how high the new development is there in Coorparoo? 19 stories. So these things are called acceptable outcomes. It means that you can actually tick the box at 15, but if you can make an argument, a performance outcome, technically you may be able to push higher. So there, they got higher by putting in on the corner of Old Cleveland and Cavendish Road when you're heading from inbound. There's going to be a 3-story glass, very expensive looking cinema complex that is a feature. They got some extra height on some of the other buildings by offsetting and having an expensive feature in there. It also didn't hurt that they got the land for free in return for putting a busway station facilities underneath. And then we go out to Bennetts Road. So even out at Bennetts Road on the corner where the service station is there, if you're in that precinct, an 800 square metre block is 6 stories. Now, when we're looking in the suburbs, it looks, you think that's small. My office is in Mary Street in Brisbane. We have 23 stories on a 600 odd square metre site. We're just not used to being out in the suburbs and having these taller, skinnier things, but it is highly possible. I thought we'd use an example. So what could we do with, in the Eastern Corridor, I picked an address you might be familiar with, 60 Old Cleveland Road, which is a couple of metres that way, to see how we could apply. So this is PD Online. This is the interactive mapping facility of PD Online, so I can fill up all the stuff, and we're sitting here. It's a 405 square metre block called MU3, which is mixed use corridor. Mixed use meaning commercial, residential. It's a corridor, it's that ribbon again, which means we're looking at height. So as we go to the hierarchy, the next thing I looked at is what's the neighbourhood plan. You can see in the orange here we've got Stones Corner Corridor, NP 003B, Langlands Park Residential, NP 004B, Langlands Park Corridor. So these are the finer planning instruments where they look at what needs to happen in a particular area. Okay, so by our local part of the Eastern Corridor Plan, so that NP 003B, which is just the Stones Corner precinct in this little part of Stones Corner, less than 800 metres squared is actually not specified. They haven't put a cap on it. You need to demonstrate what your height should be. If you're to buy the neighbours or to walk through here and combine both, we're at 6 stories. So 6 stories is the tick the box, the acceptable outcome. You may be able to get some more height than that. In here, 2,500 square metres only get you 8 stories. So in this little precinct, you're not going to have developers coming along and trying to buy huge tracts of land because the extra 2 stories isn't worth it. If we went back to Buranda and we went to 25 stories by getting to 2.5, or if we went to Coorparoo and got to 15 stories by getting to 2.5, there's more motivation to aggregate the land. So what that means is, even if you're not looking at suddenly going out and building a 25-story building, if you're buying individual lots along here around these corridors, a 450 square metre block just here and inside Spring is probably not going to be the last holdout position for a developer, that it might be up the road where that extra 450 might get them to 15 stories instead of 6 or 8. So it's using these sort of knowledge, having a look at your local plan and your neighbourhood plan to see whether that normal residential block that you're buying, as the development sites get more and more scarce, because if you're the last holdout person in that block, your block is worth a lot more. Or if you're, even if you're not the last holdout person, if you're in the group that they need to get 2.5, if they're building 25 stories or 15 stories as opposed to 6, what they can pay you for your block is a lot more. The other sort of things they'll talk about is what sort of side setbacks. So we're still looking at this particular block. So for this particular block, commercial. If there was a straight commercial, you could build to the boundary on the sides for the first 8 stories, assuming you can got enough land to get to 8 stories. If we aggregated these two, we're only at 6. If it was commercial, we can go right upside. Makes sense. We're in a commercial district here. It works front and back. Residential has 3 metres of non-habitable rooms. So you might see, we see it in the city a lot, you're going to start seeing around here podiums, they call them, where you've got the little part that goes up 1, 2, 3 or 4 stories, fills the whole block, built to the boundary, then you come in, sum and shrink. So here we've got 3 metres for non-habitable rooms if you're at the ground level, which basically means we don't really want residential at the ground level, because if you're on a 20 square metre, you're on a 20 metre frontage like this and you've got to come in 6 metres, it's not worth it. They want you to go commercial on the first part. So there's some subtle controls in there. And then once you get up to height, so in this precinct, because it's a nice little shopping village, they don't want 3-storey and 4-storey podiums, they only want 2. So they want a higher to feel like you've got that little shopping village part in the buildings, and then shrink right in to a skinnier tower to go up. So there's, you're not like in the city where you're losing sunlight, etc. This reinforces again, front setback, 0 for the first 2 stories. So they want you to be like we are here. We have a 0 setback on the frontage here, and we have a 0 setback on the upstairs. And they'll also make you hang out awning and other things. But then, again, trying to reduce the impact of that tower, they've gone back 6 metres once you go 3 stories and up. Rear setbacks, again for a commercial, 0. If you're residential, on the ground 4.5 metres, and then 6 metres for 5 stories and 10 metres for stories upwards. So basically these finer plans, they're almost building you a 3D model of what you can do on the outside. So that's the end of my part on the Eastern Corridor. Didn't want to go into too much detail. There's a heap in there that comes right down. Like I said, in some places they've almost drawn the exact building for you. I've done out of Cannon Hill, all the new towers that are opposite the East Village on the corner of Creek and Wynnum Road, right back. I've been involved in 8 of the towers that are along there from either a planning or a legal perspective. Those ones were so finely controlled, they were drawn for them. There was no leeway. What's there is basically, so how it looks and the materials you use might be different, but they've basically drawn you a box exactly, and there's no leeway. The big change in city plan that might also affect you is subdivision. So 405 that we had here, the old 16 perch has been the minimum lot size for as long as I can remember. You look at anything post 1900, I've got a little place up in Petrie Terrace that sits on 148 square metres, which actually works when you can shake hands with your neighbour through the window because they didn't worry about fire separation or anything. You're a normal sized cottage, but you're only 100 mil from the boundary. But after those 1890s, they moved to the 405 as the standard lot, and whether it was 405 and 810, multiple ones through. And then when we got to the post-wars, we started to get the 600s and the 15s. So it's been a long time that we've had that. That's changed. Now, I actually think that Brisbane City Council retreated on this. When the first draft planned out, any low-density block in Brisbane was 300 metres squared and 7.5 metres wide, which if you go to Adelaide, does them beautifully. They have gorgeous houses down there sitting on 300 metres and 7.5 metre frontage. Brisbane, the easiest thing to think of is if you go down to Key Street in Bulimba, the mansions sitting on there are sitting on 7.5 metre blocks and 300 metres of width. You don't know it from the front because one house will touch the boundary here and then one will touch here, and they have little courtyards and they're well designed. But when that came out in the review, there was uproar that we were going to have too much density, and they actually pulled it back and made it this. So it sounds confusing. Centre zoned land. Centre zoned land is pretty much all commercial. They don't have a commercial zoning, they have a centre zone. So here, from the last slide, we're on mixed use 3, commercial. If you find anywhere that has 2,000 metres squared of centre zone land, and you can walk from pedestrian entry to pedestrian entry within 200 metres, not 201, I've had 201 knocked back. It's 200, but if you want to appeal in court, you'll get 201 through, but council will knock back if it's 201. And they will make you, if it's more than 190, they will make you get a surveyor to give a certificate to say exactly how many metres it is from the pedestrian entry to the pedestrian entry. You can split down to 300 metres and a 7.5 metre frontage. Now the interesting thing was that is, as I said before, at the post-war area, there's a heap of 600 square metre blocks that are 15 metres wide. And you can build to the boundary wall, either touching, so it looks like it's under one building, like a duplex, although they're completely freehold, or you can zigzag them like they do in Keep Street. So one house touches the boundary in one place and one doesn't. And you can still build a very big house on that. I think it works even better. There was one that you guys had up in Norman Park, just recently, the old knockdown one, you couldn't even go inside. Peter, what street was? Moorhead. It was on a 20 metre frontage, but 30 years ago they sold off the backyard. Unfortunately, it was 30 metres short because there's shops around the corner and across the road. You could have built 2 10 metre wide blocks on there. They're only 30 metres long. So you had full size house, your backyard was just a little bit smaller than before. But, and so there are plenty around like that, but there's a lot more of the 15 metre frontages where you can actually build them together. Like I said, Adelaide does it extremely well. There is beautiful houses. I work with 2 developers up here that build mansions in Adelaide on that size. And Key Street is the best one. If there's ever an open in Key Street in Bulimba, Hutchison's built them all. They're very large. So a 300 square metre block, they've got 450 square metres of house on it, and a pool and nice little courtyards, and they're well designed. The really important part here is centre zone land. I talked about the post office up at Norman Park before. That's 2,000 square metres of shops. Last time I looked, it was still sitting on low density residential land. So it doesn't matter that there's 2,000 metres of shops there. It's not zoned, so you can't do it. Doesn't matter if there's houses sitting there now, but it's zoned for a centre. You can build and subdivide these. The problem I see, and this is better coming from Matt or any of his team, Brisbane people get scared when they look at an individual 3 metre block and 7.5 metres wide. So what can I build in it? They're very hard to sell. If you go and build that nice big house, they're very easy to sell. But we're not used to 7.5 metre wide blocks that are 300 metres, or we're not used to even 10 metre wide blocks that are 300. You walk on and it looks small. I think that'll change as this comes through, but at the moment I think it is have you guys sold any 300 metre blocks of land? Yeah.
Yep. Seward Street at Wollongabba?
Yep. I sold off my driveway in Petrie Terrace. It was 148 square metres. They built a great big house and there was no problem in there. But when you looked at it, you walked on and said, that's my driveway. You know, I've got a driveway and a carport there. How am I going to do that? It was already on its own title. And well-designed houses work. So in there we had 3 stories with up in the high-pitched roofs with the dormer windows, and it was a beautiful house. But you walk on these and you can't see it. So there is a little bit, and it gets worse as we go into, for vision, as we go into other zones. So around here we'd have to be 200 metres of any of those centre zone lands. But if we go a little bit further, down Logan Road and then head up towards Coorparoo, or we square off anywhere outside that 200, we might have what's called character infill, which is low medium density residential, effectively with a character overlay. It used to be, now it's called character infill.
Can you summarise that? Are you saying that the character stuff might go?
In LMR zones, or so you've got 50-50. So if you own a character house in an LMR zone now, and if you look around and go, I'm it, there's not much around here, chances are the character will go, and it will be a straight LMR zone. So when they finish this, there will be no demolition control in LMR zones. But if you've got that LMR zone block now, and you're going to go Queenslander, 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 they're going to change it to character infill. If they change it to character infill for units and townhouses, it gets bad. You can only have one lot per 300 square metres. So one townhouse per. So at the moment, in that where you have the Queenslander at the front and you move it forward, you can have a 45% footprint. So looking down, you may go up 2 or 3 stories. If they zone it to character infill, 1 per 300, say an 800 metre block goes from having 3 townies at the back and a Queenslander at the front to a Queenslander at the front and 1 other house at the back. So it will be either or, and that's going to happen supposedly by the end of 2018, but these things, right. You can still have a built to boundary wall here, but in this one there's strict visual things. It can't look like 2 houses. So you may be able to put what looks like an old Queenslander or a modern character style, but with no separation. It needs to be the same sort of size and appearance on the outside of a character dwelling. Whereas in the LMR one, you can put a block wall straight in the middle and it can look like 2 separate houses. LMR 1 or 2, which means either 2-storey or 2 or 3-storey mix. We're down to 260 metres squared. So one of my guys has just done around here in the back of, where I was talking, I'm having a mind blank on the street, between Logan Road and Danzy Street in Greenslopes there, corner block. This brings in a whole heap of corner blocks of LMR zones where you've got the house on the front and you can shave the back off and have a 260 square metre block. So effectively it's a freehold townhome. Now these look small, but up in the Rangbar in the future urban planning areas where they're trying to play with stuff, there's a 50 square metre block up there. It looks like a piece of pizza, sits on the corner of a block. There's about 80 square metres of house on it, which sounds crazy, but compared to it's a 1-bedroom house, but there's no body corporate, so it's a 1-bedroom house alternative to a 1-bedroom unit. They've got 80 square metre blocks of land up there, everywhere, whole streets of them, terrace housing. So again, they're small, they're only 2 bedrooms, but they're freehold. And I think this sort of stuff, as we get infill and people are starting to worry about body corporates and some of the other things that are going on, freehold of this sort of stuff may become more attractive to people, which is what they're trying to do. Again, this one can have a built to boundary wall. If it's got a character overlay, you may have to look at visual, you may not. If we go in, I just picked up a total, not quite 1,800 metres. That should be 180 metres. So if you're in a 3-storey LMR zone, you can do a 180 metre block and down to a 6 metre frontage if you have rear car access. So again, it sounds small, but if you're building 4 townhouses on an 800 square metre block next door and you're the last left house there, you're effectively able to build 1 or 2 townhouse alternatives with no body corporate. So it'll look just like a townhouse and might look like a freehold house. But very big changes for Brisbane on the subdivisions as to what we're used to from that traditional. Everything was 405 and particularly in this area until we got over to those 600s. And that's it. So I have about 30 people in my law firm, so I get to have all the other areas as well, but I live and breathe the property. stuff and planning. So I get to spend my time in planning environment court and doing developments from towers to 2,000 lots down to one into two. I didn't want to bore you with too long with slides. I just gave you a couple of examples. There's plenty of other changes around. You know, the 9.5 metre height thing was a big one as well. It used to be 8.5 metres you could jack up a house to, now 9.5 metres as of right after the floods. They've gone from what is called a gross floor area development to a footprint element. So you used to be able to add up all the internal areas of a block, and that was how it was restricted, but then garages didn't count. So you could put garages along the boundaries and you could build a really big building that had a small GFA. They've gone to a footprint model. So in the low medium density, if you get your block, times it by 0.45, 45%, that's your footprint, including car parking, anything with a roof on it, except for pergolas that are attached. So now you can go, if it's 3 stories, you go 45. So if you've got a 1,000 square metre block, you've got a 450 square metre footprint. 3 stories, you've got 1,350 square metres of building. Much easier than going, I've got 60% GFA, now my stairwells might not count, and balconies don't count, and this doesn't, it's an easier model to work out. The other change, it came in before, but is entrenched now, is that if you have a basement that's no more than 1 metre above natural ground level, it doesn't count as a story. So you can have, in a 2-story zone, as long as you dig in half a basement, you can have effectively 3 stories, so parking and underneath, sort of more density by stealth. But yes, I didn't want to bore you with slides from help because I know people normally like to ask some questions and go over anything I've said or anything about it.
Very good. So, did anyone learn anything tonight? He just had no useful information for us at all, did he? Daryl, I don't think you brought anything to the table at all.
No, sorry.
We just need to get on that website and we'll all be experts. It's as easy as that.
Yes, unfortunately sometimes people think it is, and yeah, the overlays are vital to check. And there's there are other things as well. Yes?
On those overlays and the neighbourhood plan, when council are assessing them, how restrictive are they actually on the code, the
Yes.
neighbourhood plan code? So if a development there says it's 60% of the site,
Yep.
okay, and someone's put in 72,
So it used to be, in City Plan 2000, we knew as town planners what we could bend
Yep.
because of the court cases that happened previously. This is so new. One, a lot of the court cases haven't occurred yet. So for example, 3-story houses in Queensland, in Brisbane, sorry, the first 3-story house was built by a barrister down at Manly who said, I don't care what the regulations are, I'm going to build it illegally and they can sue me later. And he won that case, and that's why we were allowed 3 stories under 8.5.
okay, but on that site where it says on how to read the city plan, it says there's something like there is no relaxation of the acceptable outcomes. So if the developer's not meeting those acceptable outcomes
Yep.
that are required,
So it used to be, acceptable outcomes are only a suggestion. The performance outcome is what is there. So for example, where those lot sizes I gave you before, they were the acceptable outcomes. The performance outcome would say the subdivision has minimum lot sizes that allow the building of a dwelling and sufficient recreation space, taking into account the local area and the prevailing densities required.
yeah, but if it has something like a minimum development lot of 2,000 square metres, where it's specific,
That's still only an acceptable outcome. So you might be able to get that through at 500. That's the way it's supposed to work. Now I must say at the moment, since the election was called in Brisbane City Council and post through, they have gone completely the other way and are not accepting performance outcomes unless you've got the money to go to court. They roll over as soon as you go to court, which is unfair. So I've had a block that was 793.5 square metres, split into two. All it was the road changed a little. So we had 3.5 metre strip missing from 2405 or 2400 blocks. Council said no.
So they are being stronger, are they, on that, or?
They are. They're not supposed to. The state hates it because we need to get the density in there. It's supposed to be a performance outcome. The plans are written so that they're not allowed to do that. Brisbane City Council is particularly militant at the moment. They have a lot of money to fight this, and they know that people are pushing back on it, so they are fighting some of them, but it's only really affecting, unfortunately, the little developers. So it affects my mum and dad developers more. So Kangaroo Point, there's a 15-storey block they put through as 25. The one that's been in the paper about next to Customs House in the city, that one was 10 stories or 15 stories higher than was allowed. So there are performance outcomes which, if you can demonstrate for that block that you can go higher or it has the same impact. So if it looks and the neighbours have the same impact as what would have otherwise occurred, then you should be able to get it through.
But if it's the first one in a new precinct,
Yes?
are they going to be restrictive on it, do you think?
At the moment, yes. They are being exceedingly restricted. And so if you've got a pre-46 house that is, I have 8 of those in court. Now, I've never in my planning practice or in law firm ever worked for anyone who's had a character house in a proper character zone and applied for demolition. I said, no, go away. I like old Queenslanders. I'm not going to demolish them. I think unless they have no character. I've had 8 in court this year. Council knows people don't like them. They're saying no to everything. So I've had rendered block, low set, things that look like a toilet block get knocked back at council, and it's then only been that it costs my client $8,500 to lodge an appeal, and then the court says no. So the council can say it wasn't us, sorry, constituents and voters, it wasn't us, the naughty court made it get through, which I can sort of see. The problem is it really affects the people. It affects the small people. It affects the people who are wanting to knock down the old toilet block. In this case, a first home buyer who wanted to knock down the old toilet block and build a character house in a street of beautiful Queenslanders with one rendered brick and tile thing with aluminium windows replacing where the timber ones was, but because it was in that 1946 aerial photo, council just says no, and you have to go and appeal. And luckily, on that sort of one, they roll over first, because it's $8,500 to lodge, it's 15 to go to mediation, and it's 50 to go to court, and that's without heritage architects. But on the bigger stuff, if it's density and it's close to boundaries and things, for a first one, I think they'll still be really strict. In the city, they're being less, but it is it's very scary for small boutique quality developers and first-time developers and mum and dads, in that if you can't tick every box, they're saying no. So where it might have cost you $8,000 to do a whole application with drawings, it's blowing out to 50. If you're a first home buyer, it's just not an option. They want you to say, you put it in, and they say, we're not going to support that straight away. We'll give you 3/4 of your money back. Whereas, as one of my clients today said, I've paid $2.5 million for the block. I'm not going to do that. But I'm really upset that they're doing that to me when I tick all the boxes, because the guy next door, they did it too, and he couldn't afford it because he bought one. It's unfair that they're going for and it's exceedingly expensive. Court and law is not just, it's paperwork, and it's exceedingly expensive.
Very good. I thought we'd struggle to get
yes.
questions, so I thought we'd needed like a prize for the first question, but we didn't struggle, so but we'll get the prize anyway. I've just got the microphone here because we actually had people say they couldn't be here and wanted to listen to it, so we're going to go on the
Daryl,
mic.
this one's a little bit off topic. I own properties in Stones Corner and own a business in Deshan Street. Both of the properties are subject to flooding.
Yes.
The amount of development happening around here, particularly the Pelicano development on the corner, the one you're aware of, obviously, of Pedestrian Street, and the
South City Square.
correct, yep, and the monstrosity happening down with the student accom at
Yep.
Buranda. Anyone who lives in this area has seen the way Hanlon Park becomes Hanlon Beach within a few hours of heavy rain. Witnessed only again the other night, and I'm interested to know, from your perspective, what mitigation or what contingency rather is being enforced on these developments to minimise any contribution I have to increasing the floods, because the water comes up very quickly, and I'm thinking when they build these places, I'm not sure how they're going to become flood proof, but how will they affect the existing properties and the neighbouring properties in this area once they're up and running?
So at the end, they have to design the engineering to say that it has zero impact on the neighbours.
Sorry to interject there, but how can they guarantee that it's going to have zero impact on neighbours until a flood event occurs?
Yes, it's all done with 3D modelling, but what I can say is that each of those apartments, if it's 2-bedroom, gets 21 grand as a gift to the council for infrastructure contributions, and 27 if it's a 3-bedroom. And occasionally they spend money like they're doing in Coorparoo. So I hope they're going to fix this at some stage. The Coorparoo Creek that's going through there also has a big clean out of Norman Creek attached to try and reduce this through here. So eventually Hanlon up here will become a wide rocky stormwater terrain.
There is plans to, because I spoke to council a couple of years ago about it again, but there was no money. There was a grandiose plan, but there was no money, and never going to be any money accordingly. But so you think that they will excavate that park at some point and make it genuine?
So the money from the Coorparoo development, some of that has bought all the land through Coorparoo and is paying for all of that in the millions to do it. So if you've got 300 apartments at $21,000 minimum an apartment, that starts to add up. So I think they will. Unfortunately, it follows the event. You know, they tend to take the money, and if budgets are bad, the money disappears into the pot.
So they are aware of the extent to which it does flood and how quickly it comes up.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they have that modelling, and they need to have licensed engineers actually assess and say, how can we reduce it? So I haven't been involved in those particular 2 sites. I imagine they would have a couple of enormous underground tanks. And what they are, they're detention tanks. So they still release water, but they're trying to release water at a slow and controlled rate.
So beyond the bridge, they're looking to clean up those causeways, are they? So the flow is consistent.
So they're going to, unfortunately Norman Creek used to be a paperbark creek. When they blasted open the port of Brisbane River got salty and the mangroves come in, and now the mangroves for some reason are exceedingly protected, even though it used to be lovely. I actually, until recently, lived on Norman Creek, so I'm very familiar with the issues around that, and got to see, well, anytime there's a storm event, I used to watch the big one, I used to watch the cars float past my house. So they are aware, and they are putting money into it. The danger is that if budgets go bad, that money that's set aside, it's only for general revenue. But I know they're doing a great job in the Coorparoo one. That will make a huge difference, so that intersection around McDonald's doesn't flood where it used to. And that is and in that where they're joining into Norman Creek is going to have a clean out. They're going to send excavators on barges, and because they can't touch the mangroves on the side, they're going to dig out the middle. And it will eventually be the same up here. It's just they knew that development was coming first, although it's it's slow, and that's where the money's coming from. So.
More questions? Maybe?
Do you think with the number of apartments being built that there could be an oversupply, and then that would cause the council to change its mood or regulate the number allowed?
I don't think it'll change that. It'll be, and I think once you're out here, if it's quality stock, it's not a problem. I look at my window in the office at Sky Tower, which is the 1100 apartment complex. There's 2 more 1100 apartment complex within 50 metres of that site in the CBD. I'd be scared about that. The government won't regulate it. We have not enough greenfield land, and people don't like development in the suburbs. There should actually be more to meet our requirements. So what the Brisbane City Council has done, state government says you must have an average population density of this many people per hectares across your site. People don't like high-rises in the burbs, so what they do is pick areas where they can go nuts. Unfortunately, that's not necessarily what people actually want to move into, and we'll see that with the market. I think a lot of the, I think it's already changing. I had another 7 blocks in Cannon Hill that one of my clients had under option to build towers along there. That's gone. They've been all pulled because of what they think is coming in there. But that is because if you're building a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, there is a heap that are empty, but it is, we look after a lot of Chinese buyers, all pay cash. They don't borrow any money, they don't necessarily, they only buy in the city, the ones as a rule. Further out, they're scared that, they're still under a communist regime, they're scared that the government's going to take, over there is going to take their money. So they get enough money out here to buy a piece of property. So government's not going to regulate it, I don't think. APRA has, the financial regulator has stopped some. I mean, the foreign buyers only make 3% of the market. I think the quality stuff is coming in. One of my clients is doing a beautiful New York red brick 3-story townhouse development up in Coorparoo that is just stunning, which is actually quite dense but doesn't look it. I think quality will still last.
Hi Daryl, you mentioned before about City Council being quite strict of sticking to the rules and the codes. How long do you foresee this going on for?
A large amount of the quality town planners in council have gone. The ones who actually assess your development have left because of the political pressure. And it's understandable. It's a hard thing to balance being living close in an inner city. You've got to balance the heritage with the need that a lot of people want to live there and they want to build more in. And so the local councillors get stuff. My town planning practice gets severely abused once a week on average from you've ruined my life because you put through a unit complex next to my house. And people don't like change. There are a lot of people who are very disheartened. They thought it was getting worse and it was building up for the election, and then after the election it would get better again. But there's a lot of people in the industry that I deal with. I don't want to be going to P&E court all the time for little mum and dad developers who are doing 1 or 2 or 4 townhouses that tick all the boxes and should actually be approved. They actually meet every regulation and council's still saying no. I hate that is affecting them. If they don't like it, change the rules so that it's stricter in there. The problem is the state government has said this you have to do here. They've approved it to get the density through to meet the magic number of how many people we need to make for population growth, and then they don't want it. So I can't see it getting better, unfortunately. All that will happen is that as the plan gets more mature, there'll be more court cases that show that they'll get costs awarded against them if they knock back that side. And yeah, it's very scary for there's no confidence for the little people who develop 4 townhouses a year and come and buy. My red brick girl has had to go through court, and that was code accessible and ticked every box, and it was only because of her $2.5 million purchase of the land because she's a little bit bigger than the others that she can afford to. So yeah, it's just not going to change. Yeah.
And there's a bit of talk about affordability. I don't know if you've heard that in the last couple of weeks. I heard a guy talking about it. Yeah, they're going to. I know they're going to fix it, but
there's a War on the Young special on Triple J on around ABC 2 tonight about how Gen Y can't afford houses and how horrible.
so where is? But in the scheme of things, then this difficulty with council, how is that affecting? What sort of extra cost is there associated now? Like you're talking $50,000 for court cases and things like that. It's pretty substantial, isn't it, on a small development?
And the infrastructure contributions are just ridiculous now. So ours are the highest in, and you don't get anything for that. The affordability probably is not in my belief, is not because of investors and speculators. It's because of councils restricting the supply of land and the costs that are involved. So I did one, for example, 32 townhouses in Everton Park, so 33 bedroom townhouses, so 32 times $27,000 each as an infrastructure contribution. A third of the land the developer had to give to the council for a new road through the middle of the block that they didn't need because they fronted the main road. They had to then build the road through the middle of the development. They had to put in an extra line, new sewage, a power substation, all on top of the 32 times $27,000, and it's not my guy that's paying for that. It's on every block, on every townhouse on the end. So I think it's all down to the affordability is all down to that. You know, I used to be able to buy in Coorparoo, my first house was 100. I used to be able to buy a double block for 140, slide it over, and build a new replica and sell the new one on 405 for 180. My infrastructure contributions then I think were $2,000 or $3,000, not $27,000. And that was also draw up your piece of plan on a piece of paper, put it into council. 2 weeks later you had an approval. We're done, put it in, build, go away, and you were done. Now a 1 into 2 subdivision mostly takes 3 weeks, but council also has a family-friendly employment thing, which is very good, except they don't job share. So if you have someone who works 2 days a week, they might have 2/5 of a load, but they write you a letter on Tuesday afternoon and they don't get to respond until the next Monday. And then if they're sick, there's no one there to pick up the. So I've had a 1 into 2 subdivision. There was no problem. Take 8 months. That's a lot of holding costs. So yeah, it's very expensive on infrastructure contributions and development costs and building costs, and everything is bad. It's always good with the microphone.
Maybe just 2 more questions. Some of you have got 2 more questions. We're a bit mindful of time and everyone coming out tonight. Has anyone got anything else?
My philosophy is that the Pineapple Hotel was called the Pineapple Hotel because it was built in the middle of pineapple farms. If we live in the inner city, we have to put up with development and loss of some of the natural stuff. We have to, if you want to live in amongst trees and things, we're going to have to go out to the bush because we can't have both. It's much worse for the city and the environment to build estates 20 k's out of town and 30 k's out of town than it is to lose some stuff in here. And there needs to be a balance, but there's a lot of them not in my backyard stuff. And it's from people who, after they bought, they would have never been able to buy there in the first place if it wasn't for the fact. So I've bought my townhouse in here now. Now I don't want the townhouse beside because my view's going to go.
Wouldn't it be cheaper to build a road above a road instead of reclaiming and then to a point where you can then expand out to a 8 lane or 6 lane?
You'd imagine.
As in overseas cities.
Yeah, you'd imagine so, but I don't know where it is. The guy I feel sorry for is the one, there's 2 mansions right on the edge of the bridge there. One of those guys is your knockabout labourer who went and did 7 houses to get to that point. His dream was, I'm going to have a riverfront property, and he bought a crappy old house out in Archerfield and did it up after hours and moved his way in, and then he got to Norman Creek, and then he did a second one on Norman Creek, and then he got that, and that was fine because at 6 lanes the other side of the road was going. At 8 lanes they had to move it that way, so no amount of money. They have to pay you fair, but no amount of money can compensate him for he's worked for 20 years to build that house and worked his gut. So, but yeah, I don't know if it's that much dearer to build on top than regime. You'd think so with the land, but then people probably will complain that the house is now sitting in shadow. And they have to compensate, and the council's got better, they compensate well. But the problem is the Laidlaw parade guys that are Riverfront and not Wynnum Road front are about to become Wynnum Road front. And they don't get any compensation because they haven't lost any land.
That'll be popular. Last question before we wrap up.
Just one quick one locally again, sorry guys. The corner of Junction Street and Old Cleveland Road, it's a real rabbit run between O'Keefe and Cornwall in the peak hours. In the mornings heading back to the freeway, coming into work that way as well. It's been a notorious T intersection, you know, people darting out to the roundabout, cutting left U-turn. Is there anything, as a developer for the student accommodation obliged to contribute towards the remodelling of that intersection, do you know? Or
I haven't seen anything, unfortunately.
Okay. So, okay.
No.
There might be, how many units are they building there? 400 or something?
4,000, isn't it?
I think 4,000?
So you won't notice anything.
So
4,000 times 23,000.
yeah, no,
Probably just won't
that's the
be enough, will
problem.
they?
That is actually, and that's the problem. We have a shortage of student accommodation. If you've seen all the student accommodation towers going up, council said no infrastructure contributions for student accommodation. So that's why Blue Sky have built $500 million of towers under construction in Brisbane at the moment, because they've gone from having millions in infrastructure contributions per tower to nothing.
Will they have car accom in these student accoms, or are they
They can have small amounts, and it depends where you are. Again, that Sky Tower across from me in the city is a perfect example. 1,100 apartments on the flat front, on the rear block, 40 stories on the front block, 900 car parks. So, but then that's probably the perfect place for no cars, because you've got busway and train station.
Very good. Hey everybody, how about thanking Daryl for his time tonight? I know you've been handing out the gifts, but we thought we'd better
Thank you very much.
With something with the Jeff Jones ribbon there. So yeah, look, hope that was great information for everybody tonight. So just starting off our seminar series again. Yeah, we're going to send out some survey stuff tomorrow. We'd love some feedback on how we can work these seminars better. We've set up some coffee and some tea and bickies and cake out there. So yeah, love you to hang around. The Jeff Jones team are here. Sam's ready to chat, aren't you, Sam?
I'm ready.
He's got all the answers, and Pete's here. So, yeah, look, thank you very much, everyone. If you can hang around and have a coffee and say good day, that would be fantastic.
I've still got lots of freebies left. One of the things from having a big conveyancing practice is we need to have lots of merch that I give out and we send out to people all the time. So I've got a box full if anyone, or the young club would like hats or coffee mugs or anything. I don't want to carry a box home, so please help yourself.
We'll get down the front, hey?
Probably not Matt's controller.
Thank you, Pete. They won't charge that. Don't need out the wine.
Yes, yeah, that actually my wife and my being a good English teacher.